another episode of VETchat, the UK's leading veterinary podcast. We're very fortunate today to have Kerry Freel on the line. Kerry is a veterinary anatomical pathologist who works at Nationwide Labs. We're going to be talking today all about new technology, how it can really help us as vets in practice. We've also, if you're listening to this as a podcast, we've also made a little demo of some of the cool things that some of the technology can do, and that will be available on YouTube. So do go and look at the link below. If you're watching it on our website, of course, you will be watching it as a video podcast and you'll be able to see these things anyway. So, Kerry, great to meet you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How have you found yourself at Nationwide?
I graduated from Glasgow Vet School in 1999, and I went straight into a mixed practice job, and a very mixed practice job. So cats, dogs, cows, sheep, pigs, horses, fish, birds, reptiles, small furries, the occasional invertebrate, random wildlife. So it was a bit of a trial by fire. And I was there for about 3 years. And then 6 foot tall police officer encouraged me away, not in a custodial capacity. And I moved to Lanark. He was based in Airdrie at that time, so I moved to Lanark and took up a position here as a small animal veterinary surgeon with a focus on surgery. So I don't know if I was just one of these kids who always said, but why, but why, but why? And as endearing as that is as a child, when you become an adult, you kind of need to go and find out, but why for yourself. So the more I did with surgery, the more I wanted to know why things were happening, not just how to fix it. And that was how I ended up taking up a residency at the Dick Vet in about 2005. So I was there for 3 years. And at the end of that, I did my DIP RCV, RC Path exam. And then I spent another 2 years doing part-time lecturing at Glasgow Vet School Pathology Department, part-time emergency and critical care medicine in Edinburgh, and part-time working in my friend's practice on weekends. And then after another couple of years of doing a bit of all of that, I did my fellowship with the Royal College of Pathologists, and I started with Nationwide Labs full-time in 2010.
Fantastic. I share your same fascination with the question why, because why is, as my mum used to say when I would continue to ask her this question, she would say, because why is a crooked letter and you can't straighten it, which would perturb me for a minute before I ask the next question.
To be fair, that's probably a very good summary, because I would say pathology is a bit like that. When I went into pathology, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get all these answers and we're going to find out. And actually, all it ever does is throw up more and more and more questions.
Yeah. And I think it's also fascinating. You know, I've spoken to Trevor a lot as well, Trevor Whitbread. And it is that partnership, isn't it? That if you try and do this on your own as a pathologist without actually talking to the clinician, yeah, and vice versa, we're the poorer for it. So actually developing those relationships where obviously there's straightforward cases where you can see what's going on, but if there's something where what the pathologist said doesn't seem to match what the clinician has seen, it's really important to email, get on the phone and discuss in more detail, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're more than happy to take emails and calls from clients where things just don't quite marry up. And sometimes it's something as simple as the lesion itself. In an attempt to get the best sample, they may have tried to go in the periphery or the opposite, gone in the middle, and it just so happens the bit they've got doesn't tell us exactly what's going on. And it's, for instance, you're sort of pemphigus vulgaris in the mouth. It's a nightmare to get samples from that. I know, I have tried in clinical practice myself, and you'll take 6, 7 biopsies and one will have the piece in it that gives them the answer. And yeah, it's the more you talk to each other and the more information we have clinically, the better our interpretation can be of what we've got in front of us, because it might be that we don't have that classical lesion, but given what we do have, the clinical history, the progression, its response to treatment or lack of, thus far, can obviously help us say, look, there isn't the precise evidence to say that's definitely what's going on, but given everything you've told me and what I can see, I would be highly suspicious that that is the situation. So yeah.
And I think this is where we give you a better chance. If we send you 1 6mm punch biopsy of the skin and that's all you get, then it's really, really limited. If we're sending you 5 or 6 samples, as you just said,
yeah,
the chances of you making a diagnosis are much better, aren't they?
Yeah, and as accurate as possible as well. And
Yeah.
and the way things are going, everything is being graded, and you know, categorized into boxes and streams, so it can sort of better advise where to go clinically with it and what options for treatment there are. And in a lot of these cases, a lot of the grading schemes and things that have been developed have always been based almost from institutional research, and they have the whole tumour. They often have the whole animal, never mind the whole tumour, to look at. And these gradings are all based on that. And if we only have a little tiny piece of a tumour, even with the best will in the world, we can guess what grade it might come out at, but we really need the whole thing. And I think that's another thing as well. It's getting the size of the sample so that we can give you not only the diagnosis, but if there is a grading application that will make a difference clinically, then we can actually give you that all at the same time without any extra surgery, without any extra, you know, implications for the pet at all.
Yeah, no, brilliant, Kerry. It's interesting, you know, from about 2015, I was talking to the profession a lot and saying, you need to be a digital business. You know, every business needs to be digital, be it you need a Facebook page or you need better ways of booking appointments, because millennials don't want to hang on the phone for 20 minutes to get an appointment. They want to go onto the internet, sign up and see there's 20 past 10's free and bang, it's done. And to a degree, I would say I was probably ignored. Maybe a tiny bit of, maybe he's got a point. The tiny little virus that attacked us 2 or 3 years ago really encouraged us all to digitally transform. And suddenly grandmas were experts at Zoom and things. And I think it's happening in all businesses. And I know Nationwide has always been, you know, thinking about how can it do things better. But tell us about the new scanner and what excites you about it. So basically, obviously, for those not knowing, Nationwide now have gone very much digital with their ability to show slides. If you go and have a look at the demo on YouTube, you'll be able to see. But also it does hematology, biochemistry as well. So cytology as well. So maybe explain to us what this brand new machine is and why it's so fancy.
Yeah, this is the new baby, the new addition to the family is the big VETchat scanner. She's lovely. She's huge. She's absolutely huge. But she's a high capacity scanner. She can get through 100 slides an hour, and she can get through about 2,000 in a day. And that's cytology, hematology, and histology. The images that are produced are top notch, and the scanner itself also has the ability for what's called water immersion, which means that one of the few machines actually in the UK that offers water immersion outside of research facilities. It means that we can achieve the same level of magnification that you would get with oil immersion when, and particularly in cytology and hematology, when looking at samples. The images it produces are phenomenal. It really is fantastic. But it's one of these machines where it's automated right from the get-go. The guys in the lab can load up the slides and walk away, and it does everything else for them. And it's all downloaded into the system, and then the pathologists come and select cases for their folder. It speeds up work efficiency unbelievably. Having something like the digital scanner just means that instead of, at the moment, the way things work as we're moving to digital, because we're all doing our standardization and our validation protocols, but normally the tissue would come in, you would get it on a glass slide, and that's kind of been the stalwart of pathology for forever. But it's getting that glass slide to the pathologist, whether it's a remote pathologist or a pathologist in one of our different sites, or even sending it to a specialist somewhere else. That has always been almost like the limiting factor with pathology. Having a digital image means that, and one where you can literally, unlike just a photograph, we can zoom in and out, you can go right up to very high power magnification. We can send these images anywhere in the world. as soon as it's scanned, it can be sent anywhere. And that it speeds up actually reporting times as well. Second opinions are great. Teaching, it's fantastic for. We actually have a sort of resident member of staff at the moment, and his whole workflow will be based around using the images from the digital scanner. So I've been so excited about getting this machine.
Yeah.
I think I've been a bit like a parrot in the corner of the room for quite a few years.
We need to get this machine.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, at the beginning, I think just progressing to digital was really all I was really looking for. But as a company, it had to be. It's a huge investment, and it is a massive reworking of the workflow and rejigging the whole of the lab. It's not just you buy a machine and stick it in and that's it, done. It has to be integrated with our LIMS system for reporting. So it's not just plug it in and play.
Plug and play.
And with that amount of upheaval and investment, it had to be something that was good enough for histology, cytology, and hematology. And this is one of the first machines where, when we've reviewed different demos, everybody was happy with the images that they could get. They were happy, they were diagnostic, they were happy, they could work through them just as they would the normal glass slide. So this is our baby.
And I think what it means, I think, for pathologists is using digital tools saves time, and we are short of vets, we're short of pathologists. Anything that sort of helps with that allows us to do more work. Suddenly, we as a pathologist don't need to get that slide and look at it under the microscope, see the bits that are interesting. You can scan it so much more quickly. So presumably you can see more cases per hour than when you were doing it in a manual setup.
Even just on a case-by-case basis, even on our lowest power on the microscope, you could never get that full image size. And with the digital now, we can see the whole thing all at once before we even start, and that you can orientate your section better. You've got a better idea what's going on all the way around the periphery instead of zooming around and working your way. It just the time that it takes out is unbelievable. It is fantastic, and the other things it offers with measuring margins, all of these things are all little extra few minutes in the day that will all be cut out by just being able to do it in seconds on a machine.
Yeah, and I have a friend at the moment who's had a biopsy done, waiting for results, and of course that's incredibly worrying times, and it can be weeks and weeks, particularly in the NHS. If you can have a sample which is sampled quickly, gets back to the veterinary practice, they're able to ring up the client, within 2 to 3 to 5 days, whatever it is, that is amazingly quick. And how many times have I had a client say, "Gosh, your service is better than the NHS's." And I remember obviously doing my dermatology clinics, I would often see a report, look at the dog and say, these two things don't make any sense. And the first thing I would do is I'd ring up the lab and say, can you send these slides to Trevor? Because I'd like him to have a look at them, Trevor Whitbread.
Yeah.
Of course, that was pack them up, stick them in the post. It's then it's special delivery, so you worry, do they get there and everything? So hopefully they get there. But again, it is all time, isn't it? And I think for me, using tools like this, obviously a very expensive tool, but when you consider the amount of time that it's starting to save and the amount of ability to do more, probably it's going to pay for itself in a reasonably short time, isn't it? The payback period.
Yeah, but absolutely. And to be fair, we're not going to be just looking at H&E sections for much longer. The world is definitely changing. Yeah. I mean, already in histology, in pathology in general, we've moved from just looking at H&E slides originally to immunohistochemistry, to molecular diagnostics. The world is changing all the time, and as is pathology, and digital imaging opens up a whole new avenue of diagnostics, which it's where it's going to go. It's all AI and it's all deep learning, which for a lot of us, a little bit frightening,
Well, I think that's the thing. Where is tech going? Change is happening quicker and quicker, and we want to be a part of that change rather than I know it's difficult. Some people don't like change, but to continue to push against it is no good. You have to hopefully be a part of it and influence the change in a good way to make sure that, AI doesn't become something that's really horrible, but is something that's positive and for the common good.
Yeah, I think, like you said earlier, that the pandemic itself has pushed a large number of the NHS guys towards having to work in a sort of digital environment, and that's almost helped. It always does the veterinary side. If human medicine is pushing towards that kind of goal, we should be taking advantage and going to, rather than being 20 years behind them like we normally are. We should be going along in tandem, because these diagnostic tools, they're applicable across species. These sort of AI algorithms that will look for mitotic figures. They can look for cell variations. They can pick up things that we would normally spend a long time looking at a slide at to assess and grade a lesion.
Yeah.
They can do it for us. That information can be provided when we actually get the H&E slide. It can already have been done. And then it's just a case of us deciding what the cell is, what the pattern is, looking at the values, and then being able to categorize it. Again, speeding up time, more accurate diagnosis. You remove a lot of that inter-observer variation when you have something that can be standardized and quantified. And that it all helps in the long term of moving towards quick, accurate, and reproducible diagnoses. So it does help. It does help the clinicians at the end of the day. It's not just the pathologists getting excited about something new.
Well, as I've said, if we can quicken things up, that's a massive help throughout, isn't it? And getting things back quickly is, I think, really important. How do you see the tech moving, with AI and things? In some ways, I look and I say, we have been behind on the medics. Sometimes we look into the future as actually in the present moment, but just in another discipline. And obviously medicine has more money, usually gets these machines earlier. So if we can be 3 to 5 years behind, that's better than being 20 years behind, because, there is the cost implications of this. So I know you've talked a little bit about that, but what's some of the other things that we can look forward to?
Well, humans are already there. They're using deep learning for grading prostate biopsies. They're using it for breast screening. They're using it for the new sort of biomarkers. And this is where it gets really exciting. This is the bit I actually really like. This particular reference here is phenomenal. Where they're taking it is that through deep learning, the AI systems can actually see things beyond what we can see looking down the microscope in H&E. And they are effectively able to predict changes in the genome of a cell towards sort of cancer changes, things that we would see like variation in cell size, diameter, nuclear size and diameter. So anisocytosis, anisokaryosis, you'll have seen the words 100 times in your reports. We can see that, but it can actually measure it to a level where it can predict what the actual genetic change is. And these are what are called high-level labels. So a lot of things where we would have used immunohistochemistry or needed additional molecular testing or staining to actually find that information out, the AI can find it out just on the H&E section alone, which again speeds up time. It reduces extra costs of having to do additional tests, and it can actually tell you the information without having to have anything more than a normal H&E section.
I'm interested to know, you have categorized her from a sexuality perspective.
I know, I keep calling her.
Do you have a name for her?
No, not yet.
Well, I think you should. I think we should do a bit of a draw to decide on a name, because I remember as a child we always had names for our cars, and cars tended in my family to be female, rightly or wrongly. That was what they were. So they all had names. I can't remember the names now because it's a long time ago. But I do think we should have a webinar vet draw to decide on the best name for the analyzer.
The name for the 3D histech scanner in the lab. I'll be getting in trouble for calling it a girl. I'll be getting all sorts of stuff.
Well, it's intuitive and everything, so it probably is a girl, isn't it? I don't want anybody male sort of having a go at me now.
To be offended, yeah.
I could now get into trouble as well, so we'll just have to get into trouble together.
Yeah.
So how do you think it's going to affect vets in practice? We know it's going to quicken up time. Are there going to be other things? And then the One Health in general?
Yeah, well, that's really where the AI and the deep learning part comes in, because very often we'll get a case in and we'll then say, oh well, this is going to need immunohistochemistry to confirm this is what it is, and then we've got to wait for that to be done and then to be read and then to come back, and the fact that these deep learning algorithms can do all that just on H&E means that we can say, all right, we don't really know what that is. Let's run the algorithm through it and see what it is, and it will tell us, and it will tell us accurately. And not only that, it'll probably tell us the grade and the likelihood of it metastasizing and everything else all at once. So it's going to it will remove the costs to clients and to vets in the first place for having to do all these additional tests. That will disappear. The need for a lot of these things for these tests that we've relied on so heavily for such a long time will diminish. And it just means that for cancer in particular, you're going to get a very in-depth and accurate diagnosis very quickly on a single sample, with nothing else having to be done. And that for the client, for our clients, our clinicians, being able to just say to the client, right, your dog has a melanoma, it's grade whatever, we're going to have to do X, Y, Z treatment-wise, and to be able to tell them that straight away off the one biopsy, effectively within 2 to 3 days of having had the sample taken off, it is amazing. It's brilliant.
I know we've gone over a few points a couple of times because it's just to really just emphasize how important that is. And, one of the things I love about digital, obviously we were the first company to digitalize learning in the veterinary space because nobody knew what a webinar was 13 years ago. My little tagline is, we were planning for the pandemic for the last 10 years. We just didn't realize. But obviously when you digitalize, you democratize. And to some degree, you demonetize, because obviously, the cost of all of those tests, as you've said, would have been really high. And I think it also allows us, and we're talking a lot now, aren't we, about personalized medicine, that 20 years ago, we might have said, that's a lymphoma, and that might have been as good as it got. Now we can really go into much more depth. We can talk about, what type of CD sort of profile it has. Do we then have different treatments for that? So actually, although we're talking about pathology at the moment, the treatment possibilities, by being much more specific about what that tumor or what that particular condition is, allows for much more personalized medicine as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's moving towards genomic medicine rather than it just being a kind of catch-all system. And that is one of the reasons why all the sort of human work is going towards these types of programs where they can pick up these minute changes that we just can't see in an H&E section, and it can actually tell them exactly which part of the gene in the cell has gone wrong. And it means that, like you say, much more tailored medicine to specific diseases in specific patients, not even just the specific disease itself. Which, it's the way it should be. It's the way we should be going.
It sounds like exciting times, and I can see how excited you are. And this is the thing, if we can have passion in our job, it keeps us in the job. I know there are challenges and everything, but I think if we can use tools and be passionate at the same time at the job, it keeps us much more involved and excited and keeps us within the profession, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It encourages the younger set in as well. They're of a very different generation. They've been plugged into digital media and streaming since the day they were born, just about. And to be able to show them what the capabilities are and where things are going, if it can inspire them and give them an interest in something that they really want to get into, then that's the way forward, definitely.
I think, as you say, digital natives. And it's interesting because, again, if we go back 10, 15 years, when I started with Webinar Vet, it was very much, the profession was very conservative and spent a lot of time navel gazing. I mean, whether you agree with corporatization or not, I think it's helped by bringing other people into the profession, us going and looking a little bit further. We're not just looking at the veterinary papers, but we're actually going, as I did, to an internet conference, heard about webinars, brought that back in. that sort of interdisciplinary effect, I think, makes us a better profession, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But vets have always been adaptive. That's kind of part of our nature. There's never a time where you turn up on a farm to see the cow and the cow actually has what the farmer told you it's got. So you need to be able to think on your feet and adapt. So it's something that I think is part of our nature anyway. And I don't know if some of us get a little bit, like you say, navel gazing, a little bit staid sometimes because it's easy to stay where you are. But realistically, that never happens. The world's always going to change and it's always moving forward. And we certainly, there's no reason why vets shouldn't be doing it too. We're more than capable of this. More than capable of this.
Exactly. One of my favourite lecturers is Mike Willard, who's an ex-professor. I think he's more or less retired at Texas A&M, and he said everything I taught you 10 years ago was a lie. I just didn't realise. So the knowledge is expanding so quickly that we have to stay up to date. But that's actually part of the excitement of the job as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Kerry, it's been great to speak to you. I love the tool. I do think we do need to christen her at some point. So any suggestions from people listening on the podcast, please do forward either to myself or to Nationwide. And I'm sure we can hopefully come up with some really cool names.
Fancy names. Yeah, we've got some great gritters up here in Scotland. So if we go down that road, it could be very interesting what she actually ends up getting called.
Thanks so much, Kerry, and thanks everyone for listening. This is Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, and this has been another episode of VETchat. Don't forget, do go and have a look at the little demo at the beginning. It will be available on YouTube, so look below if you're listening on a podcast channel, and it should zoom you over to YouTube to have a little look at the demo. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.